Welcome back to The Explainer. So in our last session, we followed the great Pashtun leader Bacha Khan through Chapter 5 of his autobiography. We traced his really perilous journey through the tribal territories of Bajor and Momont, and we saw how he cleverly evaded the police, performed a deep spiritual retreat, and managed to safely return home under the cover story of a pilgrimage to Ajmer. But the brief piece of that safe return, it was a complete illusion. The world was fracturing all around him. The First World War had just erupted, colleagues were falling left and right, and as we turn to Chapter 6 of his life, a really dark shadow is falling over his own home. We're about to enter a period of profound darkness.
I want you to really think about this question for a second. How does a movement survive when its leader is stripped of his family, his freedom, and literally his ability to walk? This is the central, defining question of this phase of Bacha Khan's life. We are about to witness the ultimate stress test of human endurance and political resolve. So, let's look at exactly what happened when the stakes reached their absolute highest.
Section 1. Tragedy at Home, the personal cost before the political storm.
Okay, let's dive into this. We really have to start our journey here, back in 1915. Bacha Khan is at home with his young family. He has a wife he deeply loves, a toddler named Gunny, and they are just welcoming a brand new son, Wally, into the world. It's this beautiful picture of domestic peace. But as you track this timeline, you see how quickly that personal peace shatters into harsh political reality. By 1918, the First World War finally ends, but jump to 1919 and the massive Rowlatt Act agitation is beginning all across India. But right in between that profound joy of birth and the sweeping political unrest, a silent, deadly force swept through the country.
That force was the devastating influenza epidemic. It raged all over India, and it was completely indiscriminate in its destruction. And tragically, it did not spare the Khan household. Bacha Khan's 3-year-old son, Ghani, was struck down by the virus. The child became desperately ill, eventually falling completely unconscious. As you can imagine, the family was absolutely terrified. They truly believed there was no hope left for his recovery.
The source material recounts a truly heart-wrenching scene here. It was evening. Bacha Khan was sitting quietly on his prayer mat, with his unconscious son Ghani lying on a cot right in front of him. His wife entered the room, walked around the cot, and stood right at the head of the bed. With tears just streaming down her face, she raised her hands to heaven and prayed, "O Lord, take this illness away from my innocent child and let me suffer in his place. Make him well, O Lord, and let me be ill in his stead." Now miraculously, by the next morning, Ghani slowly began to recover. But the tragedy was just shifting its target. As the little boy grew stronger, his mother fell ill. She passed away shortly after, leaving Bacha Khan without the love of his life.
Section 2. The Rowlatt Act Agitation, A New Hope.
From this crushing, unimaginable personal grief, Bacha Khan is suddenly thrown right onto the macro-political stage. The year is 1919. The war is over, the incredibly oppressive Rowlatt Act is introduced, and Bacha Khan throws himself completely into the agitation. 100,000. Just let that number sink in for a second. To put that into perspective, that's enough people to fill a massive modern sports stadium. That is the staggering number of people who showed up to attend a protest meeting against the Rowlatt Act right in Bacha Khan's home village. Actually, scratch that. It wasn't just a gathering. It was a total awakening. For anyone out there doubting the power of grassroots organizing, this incredible scale proved to the Pashtun people that they could finally unite and build something completely new.
But, of course, the British authorities pushed back immediately. They had just started a war with Afghanistan, knowing full well the Afghan king was sympathetic to the Indian freedom movement, and they swiftly declared martial law. To escape the immediate harsh crackdown, Bacha Khan and a few companions tried to head for Afghanistan, but on his father's strict orders, they diverted their path. They ended up taking shelter at his father's agricultural farm at Momont Nari. They stayed hidden during the day and only dared to visit their homes under the deep cover of night.
Section 3. Arrest and torture, the brutality of colonial rule.
Well, the hiding could only last so long. The police eventually discovered their location, and the sequence of events that followed was rapid and brutal. First, a sudden nighttime arrest at the farm. He is immediately transferred and locked away in Martin Prison, and by the very next day, the superintendent of police hands down a completely punitive order: put the prisoner in heavy iron fetters.
But there was a horrific problem. When the guards took him back, they found they had no fetters large enough to actually fit Bacha Khan's feet. However, the prison authorities were far too afraid of their British superiors to even think about disobeying the order. So what did they do? They forced his feet into a pair of iron fetters that were entirely too small. Then they shoved him into a motorcar for a really rough journey to the Peshawar cantonment lockup. The metal was so tight that the skin was violently rubbed off his feet, leaving them raw and actively bleeding.
And the cruelty literally continued right into the next morning. An Afridi police inspector arrived at his cell and ordered him to walk to the court. Bacha Khan calmly explained that his feet were injured and he couldn't walk. The inspector, clearly annoyed, shouted, "You were able to walk to your meeting all right, weren't you? But now you can't walk to the court?" Bacha Khan refused to argue, but he firmly stated there was absolutely no way he could go on foot on bleeding feet. He demanded a tonga, a horse-drawn carriage, which eventually the inspector was forced to provide.
Section 4. A refusal to break, the power of integrity.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is what happens next. Bacha Khan arrives at the courthouse, but he's forced to wait outside in the tonga. And while he waits out there, he witnesses the stark, bare-faced corruption of the colonial justice system operating behind closed doors. Another prisoner, a man from his own village who'd been sentenced to 2 years for cutting telegraph wires, was presented with a choice. On one side, the offer, simply give fabricated evidence stating that Bacha Khan had ordered him to cut the wires. On the other side, the reward, immediate, completely unconditional freedom. But this village prisoner possessed just an iron integrity. He completely refused the corrupt deal, choosing to serve his time rather than lie. Furious, the authorities just dragged him right back to his cell.
So finally, it was Bacha Khan's turn. When the court asked why he had gone to Momand, he didn't lie. He truthfully admitted he was escaping martial law. The court, unsatisfied with that, demanded he furnish security. Bacha Khan refused. Consequently, he was handed a sentence of 6 months of imprisonment. But here's the crazy part. By taking this sentence for a lesser charge, he actually foiled a much larger British plot. The authorities, including a powerful man named Sir George Roos Keppel, had been trying to use false witnesses to link Bacha Khan to larger disturbances in Afghanistan. But without that false testimony, they just couldn't build their larger case.
Section 5. Punishing the people, the collective toll.
And this brilliantly illustrates what happened while Bacha Khan was locked inside a cell for 6 months. The colonial administration turned its sights right on his village, executing a massive, sweeping campaign of retaliation. The sheer scale of collective punishment here is staggering. While the official village fine was set at 30,000 rupees, a local collaborator named Muhammad Omar Khan worked with the British to completely tyrannize the villagers. He essentially extorted over 100,000 rupees from them. They took 150 people as hostages until the money was paid, and even after it was collected, they vindictively kept 100 men locked in prison.
When Bacha Khan was finally released 6 months later, he surveyed the immense damage. Reflecting on this incredibly dark period, he stated, "I can endure personal misfortune and difficulties and face them bravely, but all these events did great harm to my people." It is such a profound reflection. It's a powerful takeaway for any leader, really. True stoicism isn't just about bearing your own physical pain, but deeply recognizing the weight and the cost of your movement on the shoulders of your people.
Let's move to and see how this builds, because the story definitely doesn't end in defeat. When Bacha Khan finally emerged from that prison, he found a drastically changed landscape. The people had absolutely not been crushed by the brutality, the extortion, or the terror. Instead, a brand new zeal had taken hold. The Khilafat movement was beginning with massive, unstoppable force. The Pashtuns were now deeply involved in politics, and most importantly, they were no longer living in fear of the colonial authorities. Which brings us to a final, really provocative question for you. When a leader faces profound tragedy and physical torture, does it break the movement, or does it forge an unbreakable resolve for the cold winter nights ahead? Bacha Khan survived the bleeding feet, the devastating loss of his wife, and the harsh imprisonment. But the British were still watching. And in Chapter 7, that unbreakable resolve is going to be tested all over again, under the freezing stars of a harsh December night. But we'll unpack all of that in our next explainer.